Hello, I'm Mindy Driscoll, and today I will be presenting my research project titled Grading Without Zeros, using a two-score grading system in an 8th grade social studies classroom. My research questions were, how are 8th grade American history students' overall class grades impacted by using an alternative grading scale of two grades, achievement and lateness, compared to a traditional grading scale that uses zeros? My secondary question also looked at what role does student motivation and attitude play in their classroom achievement or lack thereof? The innovation behind this research project really stemmed from the implementation of a two-score grading system. On each assignment, students would receive a score that looked at both achievement and lateness. In most traditional classrooms, students that turn homework in late receive some sort of a penalty. In return, then, that penalty brings the overall score of that assignment down. The problem is then that students are afraid to turn in assignments because of the penalty. What I tried to implement here then was offering students an opportunity to actually achieve higher scores on their homework assignments by turning things in on time. Hopefully in return then increasing my homework turn-in rate instead of having so many late assignments. On each assignment, students start out with an achievement score. An achievement score is basically content correctness. How many questions did you get correct versus how many you got incorrect, like grading a paper traditionally. In addition to that, students received a lateness score. If they got the assignment turned in on time, they receive a perfect lateness score. The two scores that are then averaged. What students found out was that if they turned it in on time and got it correct, nothing really changed. But if for some reason they turned in the assignment on time, but yet missed a few, the average actually was higher than their initial assignment score would have been, thus rewarding them for turning homework in on time. In return, students who have late assignments found that even if they turned it in late, despite the penalty, their score was higher with this grading scale versus the penalty of the last grading scale, hopefully encouraging them to turn it in on time because they were receiving higher scores than normal. If a student chose not to ever turn in their homework assignment, missing assignments are simply given incompletes. This way, they do not actually count against the student. Previously, late assignments or assignments that were never turned in were given zeros. This meant that it counted against the student and was kind of an unmotivator in many instances. During this grading scale, no zeros are ever given. Based on the research that I had conducted, a lot of research shows that zeros are not motivators like many teachers would like to believe. In fact, they actually perform the opposite. The other component of this, and something that is actually more standards-based grading, is providing students very intense and immediate feedback. It is very important that students get their assignments back in a timely manner, that they're allowed to see their scores and be able to track their grading, and that if they do get things wrong, then they know what they did incorrect and can the next time improve upon their quality of work. For the group membership in my research project, I selected one of my two 8th grade social studies classrooms. Ideally, I would have liked to perform it in both. However, because of time and the amount of work involved, I chose simply just to keep my sample size small. Therefore, I only conducted this on 17 students total, 10 girls and 7 boys. This class is fairly educationally even in the fact that there are no IEP students in it at this time. In terms of free and reduced, the class only has 3 students that qualify, making it 5.9% free and reduced. Our overall school rates are 92 students or 35% free and reduced. When it came to the data collection, I really emphasized the usage of surveys. Before we got started, I looked at student pre-surveys in terms of what motivates them, what concerns they may have had, and how they felt about the overall current student classroom grading system. At the end of the research, I then conducted a post-research survey, really looking at what the students thought about the actual grading scale, how it made them feel, and really gauge their motivation as well. For the pre-research survey, I used basically a closed-ended multiple choice available option to them. For the post survey, I chose to use a Likert scale, offering students statements and then asking them to gauge on a scale of 1 to 5 from strongly disagree to strongly agree how they felt. On top of that, I also needed to look at students' overall achievements. So I chose to look at the units entire homework scores and how they performed on homework when they turned it in versus when they didn't. And then at the end, I looked at unit test scores. That way I could gauge that if homework was really making a difference in their overall test scores. This required an awful lot of paperwork and a lot of actual on-paper work because most online computer grading systems at this time do not emphasize or allow for the usage of the two-score grading system. In terms of data analysis, what I found with my pre-survey was that students and their perceptions are actually pretty dead on. They know exactly what's going on. When we talk to students in terms of self-motivation, the sorts of things I was looking for was what actually motivates students to do well. In this instance, most students are actually very self-motivated. Sometimes parents play a role and friends play a role, but students are never not motivated. There is something pushing them. Students are actually quite aware of what their challenges are, and I asked students exactly what on their homework they were struggling with. For the mass majority of students, they're actually concerned about their quality of work, which in a two-score grading scale system, this actually meant that even if they weren't having such a great quality of work, that if they were to turn it in on time, their scores would come up. The other issue was that students also realized that a combination with lateness also creates a problem. Students are pretty aware if they have a late issue. And if I looked at my overall students, most students only have 1 to 3 assignments per quarter is what I looked at. And that really kind of just stems from forgetfulness and overall general issues. I do have a few students, 6% of my students, which equates to about 3 of the students that do have a huge late issue. And for this grading scale, it would very much help them. Really the big perception here is that we always feel like zeros are motivators for our students. And in some instances they can be. 76% of my class, a vast majority of my class, said that zeros really do make them feel frustrated and they will keep on trying. Frustrated is not necessarily always a good feeling for people, and unfortunately it can be an unmotivator. They say they'll keep trying, but the question is, will they really keep? 24% of students said that motivation was really the key here, that a zero does motivate them to do better next time, but that's only 24% of my students. When it came down to the post-survey data, what I really started to find was that there is a huge correlation between this two grading scale system, achievement versus lateness, and overall success in the classroom. This two grading, if I looked at the actual comparison between one unit versus another, I could only go back as far as 2 units. One of my students was a move-in, and so in order to do that, I could only use 2 units worth of data. In terms of overall percentage, the first unit that I compared for this compared to the second unit, the 2 most recent units in my class, I actually could tell directly that scores went up. In 3 of my 7 students, they are the only 3 that went down, and they are actually only minor 2 to 3% changes. So if I look at a comparison on my chart, I notice that in the first unit of this previous unit, which would be a little over a month ago, I can see that my students actually receive fairly low scores, and in some instances, we start to see failing scores. But with this 2-system grading scale, students could see that their scores could go up, and many students in many instances were very excited about that. When I looked at homework and homework completion and how it was going, I could see that students who completed their homework actually received fairly decent test grades, but students who had very high numbers of late work or missing work actually correlated extremely low. In one instance, I did have a student that scored very, very low on his test, but turned in all of his homework. In that instance, that student traditionally scores extremely low and has a very serious problem with writing, and a large portion of the test includes short answer and essay questions. So this outlier tends to throw things off, but in most instances, the truth holds that do your homework and it shows up on the test. A big part of this was Likert scale, and unfortunately the Likert scale doesn't, the chart I used doesn't fit very well on the presentation, but what I get the overall sense is that students like the 2-system grading scale. They feel rewarded for the work that they do, and that they feel that their grade is actually boosted and they enjoyed that. It's really important that student motivation plays a big key in this, because really what we're trying to do here is to encourage students to do their best in the classroom. And when they feel rewarded, they do that. A lot of students are actually begging me to keep the scale because they feel that by doing their homework on a regular basis, they can bank up a lot of points, and that if they do by chance do very poorly on a test, then it doesn't completely kill their grade. A lot of the comments that I asked students to give me at the end of their exit survey in an open forum really encouraged me to continue to do this simply because of how positive they were about it and how positive their motivation was. In terms of data interpretation, most students are motivated not to receive a 0. Nobody wants to get that 0. And at the same time, students are self-aware of what their grades are and what their struggles are. Is it a late issue? Is it a content issue? What exactly is it? With this two-system grading scale, overall, students' grades did improve, exactly what I was interested in. I could see a strong correlation between students who do all of their homework and perform well on tests. I like the idea of this grading scale. It gives higher overall grades, and it is basically allows students to cover for poor test performance. Not everybody is an excellent test taker, and because of that, I am always concerned that students are punished for it. In this instance, with this grading scale, students get a very positive amount of feedback, and that then allows them to continue in a positive manner in our classroom. For my action plan, I would like to incorporate the two-score grading system into some of my other classes, maybe not all of them to begin with, but slowly incorporate them as time goes on. Because what I really would like to see then is once I get outside of this individual classroom and I start incorporating it into other ones, I'd like to evaluate it for its effectiveness and if it really does make a difference in the long run. I also would like to explore the addition of standards and mastery. I think that this is a step in the direction of standards-based grading with the increased amount of feedback, the ability to, it would basically allow itself to the point where you could retest, you could master different skills. The homework in a lot of instances in standards-based grading is optional. In this grading scale, the homework is also optional. As long as they perform well in the test, their grade will be a positive reflection. I also would like to find a way to encourage students to do their homework, considering the fact that there is such a positive correlation between homework and their test results. I also would like to share the findings with other teachers and encourage them to try to find a way to grade without zeros, because no zeros is a very positive motivator for students. In conclusion, what I did find was that the two-score system raises grades, but the question I'm also concerned with is it really providing an accurate story? Am I really able to find out what students are really learning with this two-score grading system? Students want to do better. I've seen that time and time again based on my information. Motivation and self-awareness is very important when it comes to students and how well they achieve in the classroom. It is important to find alternatives. Research shows that zeros are very negative and are not motivators. So we as educators need to find a way to grade our students and encourage them and not discourage them. Thank you.